Hey guys, welcome to Dream Coin, where we show you how to invest for a better tomorrow. My name's Tyler, and today we're going to be going over the MRIN stock action, why it had a severe downtrend today, and I'm also going to be giving updates on the short interest, as well as going over some predictions that I feel like can play out for MRIN over the next couple days to end the week. So as you can see here, it had a severe downtrend starting in pre-market from yesterday, where it was running around $24 and hit its highest price so far above $25. And we saw basically just a large pullback through the day, and then it consolidated right around this original support I had given it of 1850. This is one I ended up putting through the day that I expected it could possibly break through. And then in my previous video yesterday going into today, I did say that even though I believe there was a lot of upside and they could touch 30 with the right volume, that they could possibly pull back to the 1660 area, and they actually had a low of 1740, which is pretty good. So they didn't go all the way down to the bottom support that I saw, which is nice. So this could possibly be a sign of higher lows over a longer period of time. And as we look back here on last Wednesday, even with a huge amount of volume, basically almost 3 times the volume that we saw today, they still had a severe downtrend after hitting their new highs at that time, which were almost $19. So they sold off from 19 and went down to $10. So that's why I wasn't too upset with the price action today, and was actually a little more bullish after how it all played out, because they didn't touch my support and they didn't get cut in half essentially like they did last Wednesday. The other thing to keep in mind while we're looking at them is that they did only have about 20.75 million volume for the day, which is a lot less than prior days where we were trading up in the 100,000s and even 300,000s for a few days last week. And then yesterday we were trading above 50 million. So this is more than half gone from the volume that we had on Tuesday, and this basically set us up to possibly have a good pullback into tomorrow depending on how things play out. Now, one thing that we did notice is when they released options this morning, it seems like there may have been some shorts covering through that method, which I said could be a possibility, but I do see a lot of people spreading some false stuff around. So I just want to cut that before we go further into the short data. A lot of people were saying like, oh, well, they released options to bail out the hedge funds and everything that were going on with this. And that's just stupid. Like, point blank, the OCC is not colluding to bail out hedge funds to add options transactions to a stock. They literally just met the requirements for volume and stuff that they didn't have previously, and they got options that way. So the fact that there was a lot of people saying that kind of just irritated me, because it's just one of the dumbest like conspiracy things that you could bring up, and I've seen a lot of that coming out. So I just wanted to make sure I covered that real quick as well. But like I said, it did look like some shares were covered, which was roughly 2.32 million shares. The short interest is still 110%, which is still pretty high, and the cost to borrow is still pretty high, where it's estimated to be anywhere from 200% to a bit over 300% depending on the loaner of the shares to people borrowing them. And the current short interest in shares is approximately 10.87 million, so it's still higher than the float currently just in naked shares. Something to keep in mind with this is that yes, there were shorts that covered today, presumably just based on the data, and they did it strategically so that the price didn't rise too much looking at the rest of the day. So they played this smart, because we were on a severe downtrend from the market today. They had some talks with Jerome Powell and some of the Federal Reserve and everything, and that made a lot of the market pull back, because a lot of people just generally don't buy in on those days, because they've, especially over the last few months, become predominantly red days across the board. And we did see a lot of red on the market in general. So that probably contributed to some of this downtrend in MRIN, which, considering where they were yesterday and where they've had their downtrend last week from their highs, I didn't really think they had that bad of a day in general, especially because a lot of the day they were still sitting above $20. It's going to be a case where if they don't get a lot of volume in and they sit around where they did in volume or less, they could be in trouble, and the squeeze is pretty much done at that point, in my opinion. I don't think there's going to be too much going on. But if they do see a resurgence in some of that buy volume coming back that we saw last week, they can retest that 50 million or even 100 million shares. That would be pretty good for the stock, and I think we we could see a return holding over $24, $25 going into the next few days. Another thing that I did want to look over is the fact that I don't see a lot of people talking about the order flow distribution. And this is one of my favorite features of Webull, because you can kind of see a breakdown of the small, medium, and large orders based on like share volume and monetary value that were traded on the market. And for me, I'm seeing a huge difference between the inflow and outflow data for today, where there was almost $20 million more that went into the stock and buying shares versus coming out and being sold off. This looks predominantly not retail, because the majority of the money that flowed in, more specifically, if we look at the inflow for large and medium orders, that was about $94 million in a cash inflow for the shares. While as we look at the outflow, they only had about $77 million going into this from a standpoint of these being large orders. When you're thinking these large orders, especially in this dollar amount, this looks very suspect for where I don't think a lot of this is going to be retail. And this actually looks like there was a very large portion that wasn't retail trading today, which I had said before, there was probably hedge funds even on the bull side coming in. And if we go off of this data, it looks very much so like that's the case. Even though shorts cover today, we see almost $20 million in difference between inflow and outflow, especially on large scale orders, where this looks very nice to where more big money is joining the bullish side of this stock. I don't see bigger money investing in this at this high of a price point, especially after it's ran almost 1,300% at the current price from a couple weeks ago, when they don't see potential in this going up. And this being a severe downtrend on a pullback day with the Fed talks, this seems like it was a perfect time for them to buy to help drive up the price for tomorrow. I'm going to reiterate that I did see a downside to the $16 area. And while I'm looking at the chart, I do have a subscription with Lux Algo. So Lux Algo is an algorithm bot, and I like using it for seeing general trends in the market. It's a nice confirmation, but more so I like it for tools like this, where they have a reversal tool that can kind of tell you where there might be market trends even in a volatile nature. And their software also kind of lined up for my support that I expected this to be down to today, that I had made in my last video, where it said it could have possibly pulled back to this point. And their stuff is usually pretty accurate. You can kind of tweak it yourself, but it'll kind of read out stuff just in a general way. And then even more alongside that, it shows it having a similar pullback just around the support of 1850. Usually you want to do your own TA and everything, but just having a tool like this to help confirm what your suspicions are on something generally obviously helps with everything that's going on, especially since we look up here where it shows some interesting information about institutional activity and stuff like that going on with a stock based on the order flow and everything. And we see that there's about 44% institutional activity as reported by their software. We had a significant increase in institutional activity, it's seemingly from past few days, but just based on order flow, if you look at Webull in different areas that actually report that data. And this all looks like something that could be putting together a very large bull case for the end of the week. Now, as we look at some of my previous resistance and support lines on this chart, we are sitting pretty snugly on this 1850, especially going into close today. And we have a possible bounce going into pre-market just based on how it was rebounding from the lunchtime dip roughly towards the end of the day, coming back into the close of market. And what's more furthering this case is not only the large flows that came in during the end of the day, but also the fact that this stock is primarily known to move in after hours and pre-market. And so if we look at the history over the past few days, the orange areas are generally going to be your pre-market. And you can see even starting on June 30th, they had huge jumps going into pre-market. You had a huge jump here, and then you go on July 1st where you had a huge jump going into July 2nd. And July 2nd then had a huge jump that went into Tuesday the 6th. And Tuesday the 6th is where we saw this downtrend going into today. If we look at this historically, where we have staircasing patterns going up and then a pullback last week that's almost identical to how this is run in the previous week, we could be seeing a repeat of this chart. And for a lot of you that have been in the market for a while, even with volatile stocks like these, they generally run certain patterns. And the way this chart has played out was last week week on Wednesday, we had a very similar downtrend to this, but even in a more drastic manner. Consolidation going into after hours, and then after hours going into pre-market, there was a spike. So if we have the same kind of action going into tomorrow and we get some early volume coming in, because there was only about 1 to 2 million, if that, pre-market today, we could be seeing a large bounce going into market open. And if we can get a good run early, we could be retesting and retaking back this 2178 support area that we had seen previously back in this part of the chart. If we could see it retaining that support line, that's going to be good going towards the end of the week. And then I could be seeing a rise up to where we could possibly be retesting these highs. And if we retest those highs, I'm looking for $30 minimum. Obviously, I had that prediction going into today, but I also honestly just kind of forgot how drastic some people react to the market with Jerome Powell speaking. And on top of that, MRIN just saw huge volume decreases based on prior days. So just the entire market coming down, and then this having severe pullback on its own, it just turned into a perfect storm for everything to pull back and shorts cover. Remember, if we're looking at short interest percentage, anything over 20 is still a ridiculous rate, and they're still shorted over the flow. So even though there was an estimated about 40% of shorts that covered today, we are still over the entire flow of this stock. And it can also have large movements in the price, especially with a lot of buy volume coming in. The downside to this, if it starts continuing a downtrend, and this is going to be looking dangerous for the stock possibly, is that we could be returning to the 1660 area, which we hadn't seen since pre-market on July 2nd, which was Friday. And so that's where it had gapped up last week around then before it started like this little bull cycle. If it returns there and it breaks through, it might be in trouble for coming in. But with the large inflows of buy volume coming in from institutions, I do think this is something to keep in mind where they could possibly be driving this up going into tomorrow. If there's a lot of large buy orders going into the stock, even on a pullback day like this high in the price from the last couple of weeks, that is something very intriguing to keep in mind, because somebody is really trying to trap the shorts here. And there's still a lot of shorts presumably that are stuck under that $15 area. Something to also keep in mind on them is that they were activated on SSR today because they had opened pretty far down and then dropped over 10% today. And so that's going to be in effect tomorrow as well, meaning shorts shouldn't be able to have new short positions opened on them unless they go about doing it while they're on an uptrend, which is even more bullish for me, because we could be seeing a lot more shorts pile in when this goes up, and they can only do that if it goes up in price. So if this goes up, there might be a cycle where we have more shorts coming in and we could get back to those really high short interest rates. So that's also something to keep in mind. But do be aware that this is also probably going to be still high risk right now until we have confirmation it's going to review that trend upward. And so if we see action in pre-market, that's probably going to be a good indicator for what happens during the day. I know a lot of you have been enjoying the content for MRIN just because a lot of you have been leaving a lot of good support about it and the continued outlook of the analytics of it going forward. And so as long as it still has a play in it for a short squeeze, I will definitely be covering it. But I am looking to get back more into some of my other stock videos here soon, especially coming up on the weekend where I can probably get a couple more videos out. So do be on the lookout for other videos I'll have covering stocks and the market movement in general. If you're not already, make sure you're in the Discord. We did just get an official link for it. So it's going to be discord.gg/dreamcoined, and that will get you in the Discord for our community that we're currently building of people that just want to learn how to invest smarter. Other than that, that's going to do it for me in this video today, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.